I'm David Hicks with Revolution Golf Cars in Augusta, Georgia. Today, we're going to have a walkthrough video of the installation of the Eco Battery bundle number B3142 on a 2006 Club Car Precedent. We're going to walk you through this video, and not only are we going to show you how to do this, but we're going to tell you why we do certain things in this procedure instead of just doing them. We're going to explain to you why we do these things and how these things work in order for you to get a better understanding of what you're doing when you do this installation yourself. Okay, this is the bundle. This is bundle B-3142. This is the battery. This is the 105 amp hour, 51 volt through hole battery. And the through hole means that it's got a hole in the middle of the battery for the existing hold down rod to go through and secure the battery. It comes with this nut that goes on top of the metal plate that is included with the battery to hold the battery in place. This is your charger. It's a CAN bus system. It's got these connectors on it that plug into the CAN bus, that plug into the battery right here on this side. And we'll go over that more in the installation video. The charger can essentially be mounted anywhere under the seat, and we'll show you how to do that. This is the charger receptacle. This charger receptacle has the male end of 120 volt outlet inside this. So all you need is a heavy gauge extension cord to plug into your cart. And on the other side, it's got this locking quick connect that plugs directly in to this charger under the seat. So it's very easy to install. This is your gauge and your mounting hardware and your cable, the CAN bus cable that runs all the way to the battery, all the way up to the gauge behind the dash. This gauge will show the battery voltage and the battery state of charge. And we'll go over that some more later once we get it installed and show you how this gauge works. This is the voltage reducer. Now, this does not have to come with the bundle. You can exclude this in your bundle if you don't want it. The only reason you would want to exclude this voltage reducer is if you don't have any 12 volt accessories like lights or radios or anything like that, or if you already have a 48 to 12 volt reducer on the car that you want to keep. If that's the case, you can exclude that from the battery bundle and it makes the price a little bit less. Otherwise, you want to go ahead and get this. This is a good quality reducer and it's a very easy installation. And again, we'll touch on that a little bit more in the installation video and show you how it hooks up. Okay, so this is the Gen 1 Club Car Precedent. This is the 412 volt system. It's got 4 Trojan T1275 12 volt batteries in it. This system was used from 2004 until mid-year 2008. All of these cars were equipped with the IQ drive system, which means that it's got the Curtis 1510 black controller on it. The Excel system was not available on this car. All of these cars are IQ. So the first thing we're going to want to do here is take a good look at these batteries and how they're wired and get a good understanding of what's going on with this car as far as extra accessories in addition to just the drive system of the car. So this particular vehicle has a CD player in the dash and it's got headlights and taillights. So we know that there is a 12 volt source somewhere in this system for these accessories to run on. So we're going to turn the headlights on and turn the CD player on. Okay, I don't know if you can see this in the video or not, but we've got the headlight switch on and the headlights are on. The radio is also on. So we need to determine whether the radio and the lights are running on the same 12 volt source or if there's a reducer somewhere on this car already that's hiding from us that we can't see. So the first thing I'm going to do, by experience, I know that the headlights on these cars typically run off of one battery, which would be this battery here. It uses the main negative, it actually shares this main negative wire in this circuit with the powertrain of the car. This main negative cable feeds the controller, and all of the accessory grounds branch off of this main negative cable in the main wire harness and feed every negative circuit on this car. The light kit typically feeds from this terminal, using one battery to power the headlights and the taillights for 12 volts. So an easy way to see if the CD player is using this same circuit is to reach up here and unplug it. And as you can see, CD player is still on. The lights went off, but the CD player is still on. So this is two separate circuits feeding these two sets of accessories here, and we need to figure out how this CD player is hooked up so we can make sure that everything is working like it's supposed to once we're done with this installation. So the reducer that came with the Eco battery bundle, obviously we're going to install that because the lights did not have a reducer on them previously. We don't have an option. We can't draw 12 volts from a 51 volt battery like we can out of 4 12 volt lead acid batteries. So we've got to come up with a 12 volt source for these lights. The only other option would be to locate the reducer for the radio that they're using, and if it is rated for a high enough amperage, then we can actually tap the lights into that reducer and keep it as well. But since we ordered the Eco battery reducer, I think it's probably going to be a better option just to install it under the seat and then run it up to the radio and hook the radio up with the lights on the same reducer. And we'll go over that a little bit more in the installation, but obviously they are split into two circuits because this did not kill the power to the radio when we unplugged this wire. And as you see, we plugged it back in and the lights came back on. So we'll figure that out in a little while. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the batteries out of the car. Okay, on this particular car, there's supposed to be battery hold downs here and here, holding these batteries down, and they're not there. Don't know what happened to them. This is a customer car. He probably installed these batteries himself and did not put the hold downs in the batteries like he was supposed to. They were probably corroded, and he probably just tossed them when he put the batteries in the car. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the car in the tow position, which kills the power to the controller to keep damage from happening to the controller. And we are going to take all of these wires loose and pull the cables off the car, and we're going to take the batteries out. And then we're going to go outside to the garden hose and we're going to clean out this battery box and get all the acid and corrosion and everything off the bottom of the bucket underneath these batteries and make it clean and presentable, because you're actually going to see a whole lot more of this battery bucket after this Eco battery installation is done, because this whole entire side is going to be open. We're going to have the charger here and the voltage regulator mounted on the sides here, but you'll be able to see the floor of the bucket. Over here, the battery is going to be sitting here, but we want to get this as clean as possible because it looks good. We don't want any battery acid in here at all. Okay, we have located a voltage reducer for the radio behind the dash, and it's one of the cheap aftermarket kind that we don't like. So we are going to take the dash apart and we're going to remove that reducer, and we're going to integrate everything for the radio in with the Eco battery reducer that comes with the bundle. Keep things nice and neat and safe. I don't feel comfortable putting more voltage than the factory lead acid batteries can provide to that cheap voltage reducer, especially with it mounted to plastic behind the dash where it can't ventilate the extra heat that it builds up. I don't feel comfortable sending that to a customer, so we are going to take care of that for him. So in the bottom of the battery box, there's a piece of plastic here where the rod goes through to hold the battery down that sticks up too high for the battery to sit flat on the bottom of the bucket. So that needs to be trimmed flush with the bottom of the floor of the bucket, along with this piece right here on the edge. And we're going to use this oscillating tool because it cuts a nice flat straight line in order to do this. Go ahead and do it. For this one in the center, we had to actually reposition the cutting tool on the oscillator because we don't have enough room to get it in there. So now the battery should sit flat on the floor. And it does. So when we drop the battery into the battery bucket and we look down through this hole, we see that the battery has to sit right here in order for the rod to come through it. And the issue that I have with this is that the battery is so far forward here, it doesn't really give you a lot of room to put the terminals to put the wires onto the terminals. It's so far forward. So we're going to do a little modification here to the bottom of the battery tray so we can spin this battery around backwards and have the terminals on the back side with much more room to get to. It's going to look something like this. We've got much more room back here, and if you look through here now, there is no way that rod's going to pass through the bottom of the bucket. So what we're going to do is we're going to notch the bottom of the bucket floor in order to move the hook a little bit further forward. We got the battery back in. We got the battery slid towards the front of the car. We're leaving about a 1/4 inch gap before it touches. We don't want it to touch and rub. So that's as close as I want to put it. But if you look through here, we've got plenty of room now to insert the rod and tie this battery down. And we've got plenty of room back here to put our terminals. Okay, so we have removed the aftermarket voltage reducer from behind the dash on this car, and if you don't have any additional accessories besides just lights, you don't need to worry about doing any of this. But this customer in particular, he already had a fuse block back here behind his dash, and he was running his radio and his horn. So what we did is the wire that he was using to feed the fuse block, we cut this wire and tapped it into this blue wire that runs all the way back to this connector into this large gauge blue wire, which runs all the way back to the back of the car. And we'll get to that in a minute when we hook up the voltage reducer. So what this is doing is it's carrying 12 volt positive from the voltage reducer all the way up behind the dash, and it's integrating into the headlight and tail light kit through this plug right here, and it is jumped and spliced into this fuse block to where the reducer is also going to power the horn and the radio that's in this car. And we did the same thing over here with this black negative cable. We jumped it into the big black wire that runs over here into this connector right here, and this is the black wire under the seat in the battery bucket that's going to carry the 12 volt negative current up here behind the dash and integrate into the light harness and into the horn and the radio circuit. But again, if you don't have any optional accessories other than headlights, you don't need to worry about cutting and splicing anything. The only thing you're going to have to worry about, which with lithium is a non-issue, is behind your dash from the factory, you're going to have a series of wires, and you need to locate these two wires right here. It's going to be a red wire. Some newer model precedents, it will be a pink wire. But you're going to have a red wire and a black wire with a yellow stripe right next to each other. These two wires plug into the factory battery condition meter. It's optional, not all cars have those, but if you've got a battery indicator gauge that tells you what your state of charge is, you're going to have those wires. And this black wire right here, it actually ties into the negative circuit again with this black wire right here. So now that we're installing this reducer, this is going to be a reduced negative. It's going to be a 12 volt negative now instead of a 48 volt negative. So if you have a state of charge gauge hooked up to that black wire, it's not going to be accurate anymore. But with an eco battery installed, this is irrelevant because it comes with its own gauge. So we recommend cutting this wire off, and we're going to tape it up. We just haven't done it yet, but cut this wire off, tape it up to where nobody can use it in the future because it's no longer going to be needed. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bypass the onboard computer because it's no longer part of the car. We don't need the onboard computer on the car if we're not using a factory charger to charge the car with. The Eco battery bundle comes with its own charger, so there's no point in leaving the OBC on the car. If you do leave the OBC on the car, it could eventually fail and cause the car not to run. So there's no point in even having it if it's just a problematic part that could fail in the future and keep your car from working. So what we're going to do here is this black cable that runs through the OBC, we're actually going to repurpose this wire. We're going to keep this wire on the car and use it as the main negative ground, even though it's not going to be running through the hole in the OBC anymore. So what we do is we can take the terminal and bend it with 2 pairs of pliers, just curl it up, and you can actually pull it through the hole in the OBC, and you can keep this wire intact. All right, this is the other side. We're going to pull the OBC wire, the black wire, through the OBC. All right, it's through. So now we can take a piece of steel or a piece of wood, and we can flatten that terminal back out, and we can reuse it. And we'll take a picture of that for you here in just a minute after we get that done. Okay, the terminal's flat again, and we can keep it just like it is. It no longer runs through the OBC, so that could be our main negative cable. We're going to put that off to the side for now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to physically remove the onboard computer from the car, and we're going to perform an OBC bypass procedure on the wire harness so the vehicle will run without the OBC on the car. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to unplug this gray wire. This is the on-off wire. This is the sense lead wire that runs from the charger receptacle. It's no longer going to be needed. And then this 6-pin connector here has several different wires in it that run back into the main harness on the golf car. So what we're going to do is, once we get the OBC off, we're going to cut that cluster of wires out of it and perform a bypass procedure on this pigtail and plug it back into the wire harness. And what this does is it pulls power from the white wire, and we're going to loop it over to the blue wire to run power back to the controller to allow the car to run without the OBC in it. So this black wire here originally ran from the charger receptacle into the OBC. This is where the negative charge wire comes out of the charger, it runs into the OBC, and then it comes back out of the OBC through this wire, and then runs up here to the B negative on the controller, where it picks up negative from the battery and it actually charges the battery pack. So since we're no longer using the OBC, this wire needs to be cut away from this cluster of wires and taped up. Perfect. Cut it here as close as you can, and then put some tape around it so it doesn't touch anything. And you'll be good to go here. So now the OBC is completely disconnected from the car and can come completely out of the vehicle. What we're going to do here to do that is, all you got to do is loosen these screws. You don't have to take them all the way out. Just loosen each one, and then those slots in the OBC will allow you to lift the OBC up and then pull it completely out of the car. And we're going to take it over here to our bench and do the depinning process, and we'll show you how that works.
No, that's not the one.
Okay, so the next step is to replace this charger receptacle with the charger receptacle that comes with the Eco battery bundle. So in order to get that charger receptacle out, we're going to take a small flathead screwdriver and insert it into this hole right here, or a pick like this as shown. I'm going to stick it in there and then rock it over to one side, and it will release the tabs on the ears on that bezel, and it will allow you to pull that out. And that's not the charger receptacle, that's just the trim ring that goes around it. But you got to get that off so we can get this piece off. This is what they call the kick plate. And in order to access the hardware that holds the kick plate onto the car, you got to remove the floor mat by removing these T40 screws. There's 2 on this side, and then there's 2 over there on the other side as well. You got to remove those, as shown here. Then we can get the floor mat out. After we get the floor mat out, we're going to take these 2 screws right here off of the top of the front of the rear body. This is a T30. Some earlier models may have a smaller head, but you're going to need Torx drivers for all of this stuff. This is a T30 on this car. Take those 2 out, and then you'll be able to lift up the front of the body off of this kick plate enough to where you can get this kick plate out after you take the hardware out of it that holds it in place. And we'll show that to you in just a second. All right, we can pull the floor mat out or just pull it loose.
And get the T40.
You don't have to take it all the way out. Just pull it loose and have somebody hold it up. You put your T40 on these 3 screws. These 3 screws will hold this kick plate in. You're going to take those out. Now the kick plate is completely loose from the car and can come out. So we're going to lift up on the front of this body and pull the kick plate out, as shown. And now we can get to the charger receptacle.
Get my Phillips.
And as you see here, there are 3 small Torx head screws holding this charger receptacle onto the battery bucket. We're going to take those 3 screws out, and then the charger receptacle can come completely out. Okay, so this is the back side of the OBC that we just pulled out of that car. First thing we need to do, like we mentioned in the video, is we're going to cut these wires and we're going to remove this plug entirely from the machine. We're now done with this OBC completely. It can be thrown in the trash. The next step, we're going to take a screwdriver and go in here and release this plastic wedge lock connector from the center of this plug and get it out. That's what holds these pins in place. Then we're going to take our depinning tool, or flathead screwdriver, whatever you've got, anything will work, as long as it's small enough to get in there and release these pins. We're going to go in there and we're going to remove every wire except the blue and the white. And all you got to do is stick it in there and release the tab, pull the wire out. Here's the purple, here's the yellow, the red, and the brown. Completely remove them. All right. And we're stuck with just the blue and the white. We're going to reinstall the wedge lock connector because we don't need to take any more pins out of here, so we can put this back in. Okay, we've got the wedge lock installed back in the plug. So now we're going to strip some insulation off of the white wire and the blue wire and put a wire connector on there between the two and connect these wires together. And like we mentioned before, what we're doing here is we're taking the power that comes from the vehicle wire harness in the white wire, and we're going to connect it to the blue wire, which is then going to divert power to pin 5 on the controller, which will let the car run without the OBC in place. Typically, the OBC provides power to this pin, but with the OBC removed from the car, there's nothing to provide power to this pin unless we make this modification. So we're going to take this and plug it back into the main harness, and we're done with that modification. So the OBC is bypassed and completely removed from the car, and it can no longer keep the car from running if it ever fails. Okay, so this connector here on the wire harness is going to plug directly into this jumper we just made. Just plug it in until it clicks, and then you can tie this up somewhere out of the way with a zip tie, and we are done. The car will now work without that OBC in it. So now we've got the charger receptacle mounted just like this. We put the kick plate on in reverse order than what as what we just showed you. And now we're going to mount this charger. So this charger, it can go anywhere. I mean, we could put it here, wherever you want to put it is fine, as long as you leave a 4-inch air gap in front of that charger, so the charger can breathe and get air. We don't want it to overheat. Okay, so this wire is part of your eco battery gauge that goes on the dash. So what we're going to do is we're going to run it through this hole right beneath the charger receptacle. And while we've got this kick plate out, we're going to route it over here on this side of the car and run it down this channel right here, and we're going to run it up underneath this dash. I don't have that done yet. I'm just showing you where it's going to go. We're just going to go up underneath this dash, and it's going to come out wherever you want to put the gauge. You can put the gauge anywhere. The gauge is 2 inches in diameter, so it's going to fit in a 2-inch hole. And we like to use a 2 1/16 hole saw to drill that hole for that gauge. This particular car has this custom gauge on it, so there's not a flat portion for us to mount this gauge to. So we bought this aftermarket gauge housing that goes on the dash that we're going to mount this gauge to. And of course, this is a little bit different than most applications because of this radio dash. But we're going to stick it over here next to the speaker and put it in right there. And I'll have some pictures of it after we get it done. But that's how we're going to do it. All right, we've got our charger mounted over here. We've got our voltage reducer from Eco Battery mounted right here. And if you look right here at the sticker on the end of the voltage reducer, it tells you exactly what every wire on it is going to do. So you've got the input, which is 4390 volts. The yellow is going to be your positive, the black is going to be your negative, and the orange is the key switch on positive. So what we're going to do here, we're going to take the orange wire all the way up to the key switch and tie it in with the blue wire on the key switch. And the black, of course, is going to go to the main negative on the battery, and the positive, the yellow, is going to go to the positive on the battery. And then the other two wires are your 12-volt output wires. It actually is 13.5 volts, which is perfectly acceptable for 12-volt accessories. Those wires are red and black. So these wires right here, we've got them running out through here into this harness. So what we're going to do, we're going to cut these wires down as short as possible so they can reach where they need to go, so we don't have any extra wiring balled up in the car under the seat. So this orange wire, it needs to be left long because it's going to go to the key switch. The black wire right here, the black and red, these large gauge wires, these are the 12-volt output wires. So the red is going to go to the blue wire right here that feeds the light harness. And we'll take another video after we hook these up. I'm just showing you where they go for right now. And the black is the negative. It is going to go here. This is the black wire. It was originally plugged into this pigtail right here that goes to the negative on the controller. And then this side of the harness, this side of the pigtail runs down into the wire harness to feed the light kit. So we're going to hook the black wire here. And that's going to provide us with 12 volts to the light harness through this blue and this black wire coming out of the reducer. In stock form, it was hooked to one battery, which was a 12-volt source, and we're just providing a 12-volt source back to these exact same wires, so everything's going to go back to working just like it always did. The yellow and the black are the positive and negative 48-volt input wires. We're going to put the black wire here on the main negative on the controller, and we're going to put the yellow positive on the red wire on the solenoid right here, right there. And we'll take another video after we hook these up, but that's where everything goes for the voltage reducer. All right, on the charger, you're going to notice on the top, you've got, this is your status light. So you need to make sure you mount your charger with that somewhere where you can see it. And right next to that, you're going to have these two wires right here. So this one right here with this 2-pin Deutsch connector on it is actually going to be for a solenoid interlock feature to be used in the future. So that is optional. You don't have to hook that up. So what we're going to do is we're going to tuck that away. And once they get that produced, they're going to have a kit that you can install on here that will integrate with that, and it'll keep the car from running while the charger's on or plugged into the wall. So that'll be a good thing. The other wire here, this is, it runs, we've got it routed through here. We're going to tie all this up and show you how we do that here in a minute. But on the other end of this wire, you're going to notice that you've got this wire right here. This is a weather pack connector on this CAN wire, and it's going to go to either one of these two. Doesn't matter which one.
I've hooked it to both.
Yep, I have two. I've hooked it to both. It does the same thing either way, and it's going to plug into this wire right here that runs up to your gauge, and it's going to hook to this little terminal right here on the side of the battery and screw in. And that's all there is as far as the charger goes when it comes to these two wires. Now this one right here, this is the positive and negative cable that will actually charge the battery. So if you look here, we've got this one running up. This comes out of the charger. We've got the negative running here to the main negative terminal of the controller, and you can run this wire straight to the battery if you want. We like to keep as many wires off of the battery as possible, so we run it here, And all that does is it ties into the main negative, and it runs back into the battery through this black wire
Right here.
that hooks to the battery terminal. And we did the same thing on the positive here. We've got the red wire that comes out of the charger hooked to the red wire on top of the solenoid, which ties into the positive wire and runs back to the charger, to the battery on the positive post. So that's all there is to the charger. Pretty simple. Okay, so we got the charger mounted, we've got the voltage reducer mounted, we've got the cover on, everything's installed. We took all of our excess wiring from the charger and the voltage reducer and stuffed it up underneath here and kind of coiled it up and zip tied it nice and neat out of place to keep it out of the battery box. So we had to notch the bottom of this cover here so we could run these wires up underneath it without them getting smashed. So nice to have those up out of the way there. We've got our battery installed, and as you can see, we've got plenty of room on the side. In the front, we've got a little room, and in the back, we've got plenty of room to get to our terminals. We've got everything installed. We can get to the power button. We've got the CAN plugs plugged in, and if you can see down here, we actually had to notch back here too to run these power cables and charger wires out of the back of the cover. And this is, of course, the circuit breaker for the light kit. And on the dash, we've got our gauge hooked up. It's showing 48% right out of the box. And here's another thing I wanted to show you guys is when you plug this charger in, it plugs right in. Make sure you use a heavy duty extension cord. As soon as you plug that in, you can start watching your charger. You can see the light on the charger, and you can hear the fan turn on. We've got a light on the charger here. Meaning that it's getting power into this charger. So now that it's started the process, it is flashing red, which means that it is charging. And when it's finished charging, it will turn on to a solid green. So here on the gauge, you can look at the gauge and you can see down at the bottom of the gauge where it shows 14.5 amps. That is the charge rate. That is the amperage that the charger is putting into your battery pack. The gauge will actually show down at the bottom here while you're driving it too. It will show a negative value, and it will give you a good reading on what you're actually pulling from the battery pack while you're driving the car. It's also good, if you've got a draw somewhere in your system, it will help you identify that. If your car's sitting there and you're not using it and it's showing that something is pulling power, then you'll know that you've got a problem. So what you want ideally is when you unhook the charger, which we just did, you want that to drop back down to 0, which it does. So this car doesn't have a draw and everything's working like it's supposed to. We just turn the headlights on, but with these being LED lights, they don't even pull enough power to show that there's a draw in the system. LED lights are very efficient, but if we had, speakers or a radio or anything like that turned on, that'd be a different story, of course. All right, we've got it all finished. We've been out driving it this morning. We charged it last night. We got 98% battery. And what I wanted to show you was this power button on this battery. Whenever the battery is on, that power button has that green light around it. If you come out into your garage to drive your golf car and the gauge is off, it means the battery is off. And that's probably because the battery has gone into sleep mode. The battery is going to go into sleep mode after it sits for several days without being used. All you got to do is go down there and press that button to turn the battery off, and then press it again to turn the battery on, and it'll boot back up and it'll be ready to go. That's really all there is to it. The only reason you would need to put that battery in the off position is if you're going into long-term storage for the winter, or if you're going on vacation, or something like that where the golf cart is going to sit for several days without being used. It's best to just turn the battery off to where there's no draw on the battery at all. And that's really all there is to it. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact us by phone, email, or text. We'll be glad to help, and we hope this video was beneficial to you. Thank you so much for watching.